the Semipalatinsk Nuclear Test Site, the most nuclear place in the world. It is located in the northeast Kazakhstan, near Semi City. Between 1949 and 1989, the Semipalatinsk Test Site was one of the main places for Soviets above and below ground nuclear testing. In this period, during the Cold War, the Soviet Union tested at least 468 nuclear weapons. Soviet scientists investigated how nukes will destroy cities, buildings, and kill animals. They researched how nukes will affect people, how many of them will die, and how much will mutate. This nuclear test caused radiation waste and pollution that harmed nearby civilians and made people born as mutants. During the Cold War, United States and USSR governments were competing with each other to have world dominance in all spheres. Development of technology and innovation caused a totally new type of weapon, nuclear weapon. The United States produced nearly 70,000 nuclear weapons, while the Soviet Union produced approximately 55,000 nuclear weapons. Norris and Kristen, 2010. So these two superpowers were needed for a nuclear test site where they could test their nukes. The site was selected by Lavrenti Beria, political head of the Soviet atomic bomb project. However, according to Independence.co 2029, when Beria earmarked this far eastern corner of Kazakhstan to be Soviet Union's top-secret nuclear test facility, he described the place as uninhabited, conveniently forgetting about 700,000 people who lived in the surrounding villages, towns, and cities. The Soviet Union launched a Cold War with the detonation of its first nuclear bomb, watched from a lead-lined bunker by scientists and Cabinet chief Lavrenti Beria. First lighting exploded at 7 a.m. on 29th August of 1949, throwing up a gigantic radioactive cloud that then was spread to the nearby villages and cities. Independence Call 29. Large volumes of radioactive waste were released into the sky during the first 13 years of above-ground nuclear testing at the 80,000 square kilometer polygon site. Independence Corp 29. Between 29th August 1949 and 55th December of 1962, there were 116 explosions. 30 of that occurred on the surface. 5 of these surface tests were unsuccessful, and as a result, plutonium was released into the environment. International Atomic Agency, 1998. Only underground testings were carried out at Semipalatinsk after the signing of the treaty banning nuclear weapons testing in the atmosphere, in outer space, and underwater. International Atomic Energy Agency. The remaining 340 test explosions were placed underground in the geographically distant scientific regions of the south and east. This total consists of 4 nuclear explosions that left craters at Chagan, Saro-Uzien, Tilkem, and Tilkem-2, where the explosive charge was placed at shallow depth below the surface. International Atomic Energy Agency, 1998. The first and largest of these experiments, Chagan, produced Lake Balapan, also known as Atomic Lake, which has a circumference about 0.5 kilometers, is about 100 meters deep, and has cliffs that may reach a height of 100 meters. International Atomic Agency. The Tilkem-2 test likewise created a considerably small lake, 13 meter deep. International Atomic Energy Agency. At Balapan in November 1989, the Semipalatinsk test site conducted its final nuclear test. After the Soviet Union fell apart, Kazakhstan, a newly independent country, took over ownership of the location. The Kazakh authorities were not given any information by Russian scientists or security personnel regarding the locations of several of the tunnels or boreholes. President Nazarbayev of Kazakhstan formally eliminated the Semipalatinsk test site on August 29. 1991. The National Nuclear Center of the Republic of Kazakhstan is currently in charge of the facilities at the Semipalatinsk facility, and it's engaged in civilian operations and the conservation of the facility to non-defense purpose. It has no surrounding fence, and only the Baikal-1 and IGO research reactor complexes has dedicated security personnel in the 1990s. Beryllium, coal, and gold are also mined on the property, and a lake next to the primary test field is used to make table salt. NTI, no date. As part of combined U.S.-Kazakhstan operation under the Non-Vulgar Cooperative Threat Reduction Program, 181 test tunnels and 13 test shafts at Semipalatinsk were sealed between 1997 and 2000. U.S. official later deemed the site safe and no more collaborative activity was scheduled. NTI, no date. First of all, after Semipalatinsk 21 was selected as the nuclear test site of the Soviet Union, people that were living in nearby towns and villages started seeing military vehicles and soldiers. However, they weren't messaged about nuclear tests. After 29th of the August of 1949, people that lived nearby started frequently seeing explosions and they felt shockwaves. Also, radiation affected the food chain of the animals, making them dangerous to eat because of radiation that was being accumulated in the animals that people consume. Radiation and radioactive fallout from nuclear testing have both immediate and long-lasting impacts. Nuclear testing has been linked to higher cancer incidence rates, with research demonstrating a connection between thyroid cancer and radionuclides. After a nuclear test, a sizable portion of the surrounding terrain is radioactive for decades. Varying quantities of radiation have varying health effects, ranging from nausea and vomiting to death within days. The real Röntgen equivalent REM unit of radiation measurement applied to people as a result of exposure to one of forms of ionizing radiation is used to assess radiation exposure. Hannah and Mohammed, 2022. The main target of radiation is our genetic material, or DNA. Much like with many other pollutants or poisons, radiation can directly interact with our DNA and harm it by rupturing DNA bonds, or indirectly by rupturing water molecules around the DNA. Free radicals, unstable oxygen molecules that can harm cells and organs are created when these water molecules break. Once a cell is damaged, there are three things that can happen. A cell can heal itself. The cell would then return to its original state. CDV, no date. The cell is altered as a result of the damage being either not healed or wrongly fixed. Cancer might develop as a result of this alteration. CDV, no date. The cells dies as a result of excessive damage. Death of cells is not necessarily a terrible thing. CDV, no date. Your body will heal if some radiation damaged cell die, negotiating the possibility of those cells developing into cancer. CDV, no date. Organ failure and eventually death can result from widespread cell death, such as that brought on by high radiation doses. CDV, no date. Overall, such nuclear sites located in places such as Nevada, Semipalatinsk have shown that nuclear tests above the ground are extremely dangerous. Because of it, in 1963 was designed the treaty banning nuclear weapons testing in the atmosphere, in outer space and underwater. Furthermore, Semipalatinsk nuclear sites have shown that how people suffer from such places. So many organizations that are against nuclear tests, such as Nevada Semipalatinsk or Ground Zero, appeared. Social thoughts about nuclear testing hugely decreased after these kinds of catastrophes. Our ex-president Nursultan Nazarbayev declared 29th of August a International Day Against Nuclear Tests. This tragedy was shown us that we shouldn't test nuclear weapons at all. We learned from our mistakes, so people will now keep fairness and don't damage people's health with nuclear tests. So, after my research, I can conclude that revolution in development of technology and innovation can lead not only to positive effects like sustainability, recycling, and big amounts of reusable resources, but can be a source of waste, environmental issues, and pollution too. For instance, the revolution in nuclear energy has resulted not only in building of many nuclear stations that produce a very big amount of cheap energy without polluting the environment, but in the development of nuclear weapons too. As a result of testing such nuclear weapons, many people nearby Nevada, Semipalatinsk, and other nuclear states suffered from genetic mutations, cancer, and other genetic diseases.